The morning of my rehearsal dinner, I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room and told myself, just get through tonight. My dress was perfect. Ivory crepe, simple cap sleeves, a neckline that dipped just enough. I had picked it out alone on a Tuesday afternoon at a small boutique in Midtown that my sister had never heard of. That was intentional. I should have known she would find it anyway. My name is Jessa. I'm 31. I work in hospital administration at a mid-sized regional medical center in Connecticut, which means I spend my days negotiating between doctors who think they run the world and insurance companies who actually do. I'm good at staying calm. I'm good at not reacting. I trained myself out of reaction a long time ago because in my family, showing emotion was the same as losing. My sister's name is Tatum. She's 34. She has never worked a job she didn't quit within 8 months, has never lived in an apartment she paid for herself, and has never, not once in her adult life, been told no by our mother and had that no stick. My mother's name is Renee. She's 62. She is the kind of woman who shows up to your events looking better than you do on purpose and then acts wounded when you notice. I want to be fair. I want to tell this story without making it sound like I was surrounded by cartoon villains. But the truth is that some people spend so many years practicing a particular kind of cruelty, the soft, deniable kind, wrapped in concern and family loyalty, that eventually it just becomes who they are. My mother and my sister became that a long time before my wedding. My fiancé's name is Owen. He grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, the son of a high school football coach and a dental hygienist. He is the steadiest person I have ever met. He also happens to be, though you would never know it from the way he dresses or the car he drives or the sandwiches he packs for lunch, quietly and substantially wealthy. His grandfather had started a regional logistics company in the 1970s. By the time Owen inherited his share of it at 28, the company had expanded to 17 states. Owen had since grown that share significantly through his own investment decisions. He told me about all of this on our fourth date, at a diner outside New Haven, over coffee and pie in the same tone most people use to mention they have a dog. I didn't tell my mother and sister. Not right away. And then enough time passed that it felt strange to bring it up. And then I realized, somewhere around month 6 of our engagement, that I actively did not want to tell them, because the version of Owen they would see, once they knew, would not be Owen at all. It would be a number, and I wanted them to have to look at him as just a man before they got to attach anything else to him. This was, in hindsight, both the best and the most complicated decision I made during our engagement. The wedding was set for a Saturday in late October. We were getting married at a vineyard about 40 minutes outside the city, a restored property with a stone farmhouse, string lights, a ceremony space under a row of old oak trees that had gone amber and rust by that time of year. We had put down deposits with the venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, and a string quartet Owen had found through a colleague. Everything was ours. Everything was chosen by us, paid for by us, confirmed in writing. My mother had opinions. She always had opinions. About the venue, too rustic, the florist, too minimal, the catering, she didn't see why we couldn't have a proper plated dinner instead of the grazing stations we had chosen. I listened, I nodded. I explained, once, why we had made the choices we made. I did not argue. I did not renegotiate. What I did not fully account for was Tatum. My sister had been my maid of honor since the engagement announcement, a decision I made not because I wanted her in that role, but because not asking her would have caused a months-long family crisis, and I was already tired. I told myself it was a title, not a transfer of authority. I was wrong. It started small. Tatum texted the florist directly in August, under the guise of confirming a detail, and mentioned that the bride was considering switching out the white ranunculus for blush roses. The florist emailed me a revised estimate. I called and corrected it, explained that the original order stood, and sent a written confirmation from my email address with a note that no changes were to be made without written approval from me or Owen directly. The florist was apologetic. She said she hadn't realized. I did not tell Tatum what I had done. I filed the email thread. In September, my mother called the venue coordinator and asked about the possibility of adding a champagne tower to the reception. The coordinator, a genuinely lovely woman named Phyllis, called me afterward to let me know. I thanked her and told her the champagne tower was not happening. Phyllis said she had suspected as much. I sent another email, same language. My voice or Owen's voice in writing. No one else. I kept every thread. What I did not anticipate, what I genuinely did not see coming, because I had been so focused on the vendors, was the dress. I had not shown my mother or Tatum the dress. I had brought my two closest friends to the fitting instead, women I had known since college, who had opinions I actually wanted and the decency not to impose them. I had the dress stored at the boutique until 2 weeks before the wedding, at which point they delivered it, per my request, directly to the hotel where Owen and I were staying for the week of wedding events. I made one mistake. The Friday before the rehearsal dinner, I left my hotel room for 3 hours to meet with the venue coordinator for a final walkthrough. Owen was at a work call. The dress was hanging on the back of the closet door. I had given my mother a room key when she checked in 2 days earlier. She had asked for one in case of an emergency. I said yes because saying no would have required an explanation I didn't have the energy to give. She gave the key to Tatum. I found out when I came back to the room and found my dress on the bed, not hanging, laid out, and the hem, the clean, simple, floor-length hem that I had specifically asked the seamstress not to alter because I loved the weight of it, had been shortened, not a little, several inches. And the sleeves had been removed entirely, the cuffs I had loved, the structured cap sleeves that had made me feel like myself when I put that dress on, were gone. What remained looked like an entirely different garment. There was a note on the pillow. My mother's handwriting. The original was a little matronly, "Sweetheart, this is so much more modern. You're going to look stunning. Tatum has an eye for these things." Mom, I sat down on the edge of the bed. I picked up the note. I read it twice. And then I did something that surprised even me. I didn't cry. I didn't call my mother. I didn't text Tatum. I picked up my phone and called Owen. He answered on the first ring. I told him what I found. There was a pause. Then he said very quietly, "Okay, do you want to fix the dress or do you want to fix the situation?" I told him I wanted to fix both. He said, "Then let's start with the dress." Owen called his assistant, who called a seamstress his company used in the city for last-minute alterations on formal garments, the kind of contact that exists in a certain world and that I had not known about until that phone call. The seamstress arrived at our hotel room 90 minutes later with a case of tools. She looked at the dress for 30 seconds and said she could restore it. Not perfectly. The original hem weight was gone, but close. She worked for 4 hours. While she worked, I sat at the desk in the corner of the room and I made a list. Not of grievances. Not of things I was going to say to my mother or my sister. I made a list of assets. What I had documented. What was already in place. What I still needed to arrange before Saturday. By the time the seamstress finished, I had a plan. I did not tell my mother or Tatum that I had discovered what they'd done. I went to the rehearsal dinner in my dress, the restored one, which was nearly right, nearly what it had been. And I smiled and I made eye contact, and when Tatum told me I looked so fresh and updated, I thanked her. My mother watched me across the room that night with an expression I recognized. It was the expression she wore when she was waiting for a reaction and not getting one. It was the expression of someone who had hoped something and expected a flinch. I didn't flinch. The rehearsal dinner was held in a private room at an Italian restaurant downtown. Owen's parents were there, two warm, easy people who had welcomed me with a simplicity and lack of performance that still sometimes made my chest ache in comparison. His father shook hands with everyone. His mother had brought a small wrapped gift and apologized twice for the paper, which she said she'd had to use from a leftover birthday roll. My mother had worn a floor-length beaded gown. At dinner, my mother stood and gave a toast. She had not mentioned giving a toast. She spoke for 6 minutes. The toast was largely about herself, about how she had raised 2 daughters while working full-time, about the sacrifices she had made, about how she had always known I would find someone wonderful. She mentioned Owen twice. She did not mention his name correctly either time. She called him Oliver once and Nathan once. Owen's face did not change. Under the table, he found my hand. After my mother sat down, Tatum stood and gave her own toast, also unscheduled, which was mostly a series of inside jokes that only she and my mother understood, punctuated by a reference to my glow-up dress, which got a laugh from no one at the table except my mother. My closest friend, sitting 2 seats down, looked at me with an expression that said, "Are you okay?" I gave the smallest nod I could manage. "I will be." The morning of the wedding, I got ready in a suite at the hotel with my 2 friends. My mother and Tatum arrived 40 minutes after they were expected. My mother was carrying a garment bag. "I had something made for you," she said, unzipping it before I could respond. "A little alternative, just in case." Tatum found a seamstress who made it from scratch in a week. It's stunning. It was a dress, white, which was fine, but structured in the way that expensive dresses are when they are designed for a different body than the one being offered them. It had a deep V-neckline and cutouts at the waist. It looked like something from a red carpet, not a vineyard in October. "I'm wearing my dress," I said. "Jessa." My mother set the garment bag down with a deliberateness that was its own kind of warning. "We went through a lot of trouble. I appreciate that," I said. "I'm wearing my dress." Tatum made a sound, a small exhale, just on the edge of a laugh, and said, "It's going to look a little plain in photos, honestly." I looked at her. I looked at her for a long moment, long enough that the room went quiet. "Tatum," I said, "I need you to take that dress and leave my room. Both of you. My friends are going to finish helping me get ready, and I will see you downstairs at 2 o'clock. My mother opened her mouth. I looked at her with the same stillness. "Please," I added, not because I meant it, because it closed the door faster. They left. My friend locked the door behind them. Then she turned around and said, "Okay, who are you and what did you do with Jessa?" I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in 3 days, and it felt like setting something down. The ceremony was at 3 in the afternoon, under the oak trees, in the amber light I had imagined for 2 years. My dress was mine. My vows were mine. I had kept them locked in my email drafts with a password. A small paranoia that had turned out to be warranted. The string quartet played the piece I had chosen. The florist's arrangements were exactly what I had ordered. Owen cried when he saw me come down the aisle. Not a lot. Just his eyes going bright and his jaw tightening the way it does when he's trying to hold something together. His father put a hand on his shoulder. I did not look at my mother or Tatum. I looked at Owen. We were married at 3:22 p.m. on a Saturday in late October, and the light was exactly right. The reception was where the plan I had spent the week building finally moved. My mother and Tatum had assumed, I learned this later from my mother's own words, in an email she sent me the following week trying to relitigate everything, that Owen was a comfortable man, a good earner, a solid, stable professional who had done well for himself. They had treated him accordingly throughout the engagement, politely. With faint condescension they probably did not recognize as condescension. What happened at the reception was not orchestrated drama. I want to be clear about that. I did not arrange a reveal. I did not plan a moment. What I'd done was simply stop concealing. Owen's business partner arrived at the reception. His name is Gordon, and he's the kind of man whose presence in a room changes the room, not because he performs it, but because he's genuinely, visibly important in the industry he works in. He's on the boards of 2 regional hospital networks, which is how I had originally come to meet Owen. Gordon had been invited to our wedding from the beginning. I had simply never mentioned to my family who he was. Gordon brought his wife. He also brought, as a wedding gift, a framed photograph of the building dedication for the new cardiac wing at Hertford Hospital, a wing that Owen's company had underwritten a significant portion of. The photograph had been taken at the dedication ceremony 2 years earlier. Owen's name was on a plaque in the photo. Gordon handed it to us at the sweetheart table. He said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "You know, I keep telling him to let us put his name on more things, but he won't. This is the one I managed to get." I saw my mother's expression change from across the table. It was not a dramatic moment. There was no gasp, No confrontation, no scene, but I watched something shift in her face. A recalibration, rapid and private, and too late. And I felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely unbothered by her. Later that evening, after the dancing, after Owen's father had told 3 stories about Owen's childhood that made half the table cry laugh, after my 2 friends had given a joint toast that was so specific and funny and true that I had to hold my face together, I found myself standing near the edge of the tent with a glass of wine, looking out at the vineyard rows going dark in the distance. My mother appeared beside me. She stood there for a moment. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell us?" I turned to look at her. She was not angry. She was something more complicated than angry. She was embarrassed, I think. And underneath the embarrassment, there was a grief she probably did not have the vocabulary for. The grief of someone who has spent years constructing a version of their child's life and just watched it not match. "I told you everything that mattered," I said. She looked at her wine glass. "Tatum feels terrible." "I know she doesn't," I said, not unkindly. "Just as a fact." My mother didn't respond to that. "Mom," I said, "you cut my dress." She started to say something we just wanted, and I shook my head once. "You cut my dress, and you let yourself into my room, and you gave Tatum a key I gave you for emergencies, and she cut my dress. And then at the rehearsal dinner you gave a toast about yourself, and you got my husband's name wrong twice. And this morning you brought a different dress to my hotel room and told me mine would look plain in photos." Silence. "I'm not telling you this to fight," I said. "I'm telling you because I want you to actually know that I have always known, and that I'm done pretending I don't." My mother's eyes were wet. She said, "I just wanted to be involved." "I know," I said, "but being involved is not the same as being in charge." I picked up my wine glass. Owen was across the tent laughing at something his father had said, and he must have sensed me looking because he glanced over and found my eyes immediately, the way he always does. I turned back to my mother. "I love you," I said, "and this is going to have to change." Then I walked back to my husband. The weeks after the wedding were quiet in ways I hadn't expected. Tatum texted me twice, once with a paragraph of justification dressed up as an apology, once with a photo of herself at a brunch with a caption that had nothing to do with any of it. I responded to the first one with 3 sentences. I did not respond to the second. My mother called on a Sunday morning 2 weeks after the wedding. We talked for 40 minutes. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had. She cried twice. I didn't, not because I wasn't moved, but because I had done my crying earlier, in the hotel room, alone, after Owen had hugged me and gone down to the lobby to give me space. I had already put that grief somewhere. She said she hadn't realized how much she had taken over. I told her I believed that she believed that. I told her I also needed her to understand that not realizing was not the same as not doing. She said she wanted to do better. I told her I hoped she would. I meant that. I genuinely meant it. I did not mean it as a grace extended freely with no cost. I meant it as a door left slightly open, the width of one honest conversation in a vineyard on the night I got married, which was more than I had managed to leave open in a long time. Owen came home that evening with takeout from the Thai place 2 blocks from our apartment. He set it on the coffee table and sat down next to me and said, "How'd it go?" I told him, all of it. He listened the whole way through. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I keep thinking about?" I shook my head. "The seamstress," he said. "She drove 40 minutes at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night, and she fixed your dress in 4 hours, and she charged us $300, and she would not take a tip." I laughed. "She said fixing things was the job," he said. I think about that a lot. I leaned into him. Outside, it was raining. The kind of slow October rain that makes the city smell like wet leaves and something almost clean. "Me too," I said, and that was the truth of it. Not the money, not the plaque, not the look on my mother's face when she understood she had miscalculated everything. The truth was the seamstress and the 4 hours and the dress that came back nearly right. The truth was that some things can be repaired, not perfectly, not without evidence of what happened, but close enough that you can wear them anyway and walk towards someone who is crying in the good way in amber light under old trees. Close enough for that. That was enough. I thought a lot about what actually happened that week. Not the dress, not the dinner, not the look on my mother's face when Gordon handed Owen that framed photo. What I keep coming back to is something quieter than all of that. For years I told myself that keeping the peace was the smart choice, that absorbing the small humiliations, the redirected vendors, the uninvited opinions, the toast at my own rehearsal dinner, that somehow became a story about my mother's sacrifices, was just the cost of having a family. I called it patience. I called it maturity. What it actually was, if I'm being honest, was fear. Fear that if I drew a line, I would be left standing alone on my side of it. What I learned, slowly and then all at once, is that the people who genuinely love you don't disappear when you hold a boundary. They adjust. And the people who only stay when you make yourself smaller, well, that tells you something too. The night Tatum cut my dress, something shifted in me that I don't think I can fully explain. I had expected to feel devastated. I did for about 4 minutes. And then something underneath the devastation rose up. Not anger, exactly. More like clarity. I looked at that dress on the bed and I thought, this is the most honest thing they have ever done. Every polite suggestion, every we just want to help, every quiet act of control had always been exactly this. They had just finally done it with scissors. And clarity, once you have it, doesn't go away easily. I'm not a perfect person. I did not handle every moment of that week gracefully. I said please when I didn't mean it, to close a door faster. I kept information from my family for months, partly out of strategy and partly out of something that was probably cowardice wearing the costume of patience. I am not telling this story as someone who got everything right, but I think about Jessa in that hotel room, sitting at the desk while a stranger repaired her dress in the corner, making a list of what she had and what she still needed. Not a list of complaints. A list of assets. That's the thing I want to hold on to. When something is broken, a dress, a relationship, a version of a family you thought you had, the question that actually moves you forward is not who did this, but what do I still have to work with? Owen said it best, I think, without meaning to. The seamstress fixed things because that was the job, not out of obligation to any outcome, not expecting anything back. She just looked at what was broken and she fixed it as well as it could be fixed. I think that's what integrity actually looks like in practice. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a perfect speech, just showing up to the thing in front of you and doing what the moment requires, clearly, without performance, without waiting for someone to notice. Tatum is still my sister. My mother is still my mother. Some things between us have changed and some things have not. I don't know yet what the next few years will look like, and I'd stop pretending I do. What I know is that I walked down an aisle in a dress that was nearly right, toward a man who cried in the good way, and that the life I'm building is one I actually chose. That's enough to keep going. That has always been enough.